In a secluded wing of Clarence's house, hidden in shadows and silence, an unmarked door creaked open, revealing not forgotten furniture but the lingering echoes of Princess Diana's final thoughts. Princess Anne's quiet, unannounced visit was meant to be brief and routine, yet instinct drew her down a rarely used corridor where dust clung to faded wallpaper and secrets seemed to breathe. Behind a worn oak door lay the room that once protected Diana's most private possessions, preserved for reasons few dared question. As Anne pushed the door open, the air felt heavy with the scent of old paper and something burning, and she froze at the sight before her. Camilla stood hunched by the fireplace, pale and trembling, holding delicate handwritten pages that were unmistakably Diana's. The fire crackled as Anne realized what was happening. These were not ordinary notes, but confessions, memories, and truths someone wanted erased. No words were exchanged. The silence itself became the accusation. Camilla calmly lowered the final page into the flames, watching it curl and blacken, her expression carefully controlled. For Anne, the moment cut deeper than personal betrayal. Felt like an attack on history itself, a violation of a space that had been left untouched as Diana's final refuge, preserved not for the world, but for her sons and the truth she left behind. The room had been meant for William and Harry, and now it stood desecrated, its meaning violated in the most deliberate way. And saw it immediately in the scattered envelopes, the hastily opened drawers, and the boxes bearing the Spencer family crest left ajar, clear signs that whatever Camilla had been searching for, she had found ND was determined to erase. And stepped forward not as a royal, but as a witness, the weight of her late sister-in-law's unspoken truths pressing heavily against her chest as her thoughts raced. Had she stumbled into an act of desperation, or something far more calculated, and why now? In that moment, everything Anne believed about her role, her silence, and her distance from royal spectacle shattered. With ashes rising from the hearth, neutrality was no longer an option. She had become the keeper of a secret too dangerous to ignore. The question was no longer what Diana had written, but why someone would risk everything to destroy it. These were not letters meant for public consumption. Were never meant to be read at all. They carried the words Diana never dared speak aloud. What Anne uncovered was not merely scorched paper, but the emotional wreckage of a woman silenced too soon. Diana had always written in the quiet hours, when the palace felt suffocating and trust impossible, using her letters as refuge, resistance, and release. Their danger lay not only in their contents, but in their brutal candor, heartbreak-filled letters to Charles, searing unsent words to Camilla, and drafts addressed to the Queen and even to Anne herself, revealing a woman unraveling privately while smiling in public. As Anne examined what remained of one torn, singed page, she read a cryptic line describing betrayal from within, its meaning sharpened by the scene she had just witnessed. Diana's words carried fear as much as pain-haunting warning that her memory would one day be reshaped, her truth filtered through duty and denial, her love for her sons reduced to polite remembrance. The most devastating letter of all, half-burned yet emotionally intact, spoke of William and Harry, of Diana's terror that if her voice vanished, her sons would be left with only what others allowed them to remember, and she pleaded that her writings be protected, not for revenge, but for clarity and truth, and folded the letter gently, her breath caught between fury and heartbreak. And in that moment, it was no longer a question of why Camilla had tried to erase those words, but a chilling realization of the power they carried and how long someone had been waiting for the chance to silence them. If Diana's words were powerful enough to inspire fear, then the more devastating question followed: how long had this been happening? While the world believed Camilla had stepped quietly and respectfully into the spotlight, a silent war had been unfolding behind palace walls, over titles or crowns, but over memory itself. In that war, the erasure of Diana's legacy was not collateral damage, it was the mission. Diana remained the one ghost Camilla could never escape, not as a woman, but as an image ched into public devotion, immortalized as the people's princess. Lingering in portraits lining halls, Camilla now walked, in whispered reverence from long-serving aides, and in the unrelenting gaze of a public that never stopped comparing. Camilla may have won the man, but she never won the memory war, so she changed tactics quietly and methodically. It began with subtle redecorations. Photographs of Diana vanished from mantels, her favored floral arrangements disappeared from staterooms, and staff who had once served her were reassigned or dismissed altogether. Rooms marked by Diana's presence were remodeled to signal a new era, a Camilla era. Palace insiders whispered of Camilla's discomfort whenever Diana's name surfaced, of polite but firm requests to event organizers that Diana not be mentioned, and of charities once closely tied to Diana encountering an unexpected silence from the palace. One senior aide allegedly described it as a oft blackout, no confrontation, no announcements, just an unsettling absence. Behind closed doors, the strategy sharpened as Camilla met discreetly with image consultants, advisors, and royal strategists, all with a singular aim: rebrand the monarchy without Diana's shadow looming over it. It was not about diminishing Diana out of spite, but about survival, about legitimacy, and about controlling the narrative before it could once again slip beyond reach. It had never been about becoming queen beside Diana's ghost, but in spite of it, and now understood just how deeply Camilla's discomfort ran. After witnessing the burning letters, everything crystallized into a grim clarity. His was not insecurity, but a systematic campaign. For years, Camilla had been rewriting the present to secure her place in the future, shifting furniture, changing portraits, softening language, all while the eraser worked relentlessly beneath the surface. What haunted her most was not the acts themselves, but the motive behind them, a desperate need to reshape the story and control how history would remember them both. Camilla knew she would never be loved like Diana, but if adoration was impossible, perhaps being uncontested would be enough. The precision of the psychological game was chilling. Erasing Diana's memory was not merely about power, but self-preservation, because as long as Diana remained the perfect victim, Camilla would forever be cast as the villain. Determined to flip the narrative at any cost, Camilla set forces in motion she never expected and to challenge. Princess and had always remained above royal drama, but what she witnessed shattered that restraint, transforming her from distant observer into Diana's posthumous defender. The confrontation that followed was swift and private, carried out behind sealed doors without titles or courtiers, just two women bound by blood and fractured loyalties. And stood cold and unyielding while Camilla, cornered yet composed, dismissed it all with chilling calm, urging and to let Diana rest. But and saw no peace in erasure, only betrayal, and she refused the compliance Camilla expected. For the first time, and was not merely reacting, he was responding. She bypassed Charles and went directly to William, handing him what remained of the burned letter, its edges curled and ink faded but its message unmistakable. William said nothing for a long moment, staring at his mother's handwriting, tracing each line as if trying to summon her voice back into the room. When William finally looked up, something in him had shifted, a wall cracked under the weight of pain that was no longer just memory, but evidence. Anne's loyalty had never been loud, yet now it demanded to be heard. Acting discreetly, she contacted the royal archivist through an old web of trust and ordered a quiet review of Diana's personal records, knowing the letters Camilla tried to destroy might not have been the only truths at risk. Somewhere in forgotten drawers and sealed boxes, more fragments of Diana's voice could still survive. Then and did the unthinkable, he broke the code. To prevent a cover-up, she leaked key details to a trusted media ally, someone who had protected Diana's truth before and understood how to whisper loudly enough to shake the firm. The leak was precise and calculated, revealing just enough to spark questions without exposing Anne herself. Soon, murmurs of scorched letters and royal infighting began seeping into the press, because when justice is barred from the front door, it finds another way in. As the private war turned public, headlines erupted with anonymous sources, shadowy disclosures, and images of half-burned pages, all pointing to a terrifying possibility. Was the royal family actively rewriting its own past? The monarchy had been built to withstand scandal, but this time the fire had been lit from within, beginning with whispers and brief mentions buried deep in the tabloids, quietly threatening to become something far more uncontrollable. Columns soon began hinting at unusual activity inside Clarence House, including a small fire alarm incident officially dismissed as a false trigger, though its timing UST days before Princess Anne's discovery felt far too convenient to ignore. Then came the leaks. An unnamed but high-ranking source spoke of boxes quietly removed from private storage, containing documents, letters, and diaries connected to Diana. Proof was never offered, but it wasn't needed. The revelation cracked the door wide enough for the world to see the smoke pouring out. Within hours, chaos erupted as media outlets scrambled to connect the dots, flooding social platforms with images of burned stationery, partially legible signatures, and handwriting eerily similar to Diana's. Royal watchers turned forensic, archivists were summoned to morning shows, and headlines demanded to know what Diana could have written that someone wanted erased. One paper ran a front-page editorial titled "The Queen of Hearts Silenced Again," which went viral before breakfast. Online communities ignited just as fiercely, with hashtags like Justice for Diana trending worldwide as old interview clips resurfaced her pain, her warnings, and her haunting line about there being 3 people in her marriage, feeling like 4 as history itself became the battleground. Pressure on the palace was immediate and relentless. Buckingham Palace's famously composed press office faltered, statements were delayed, calls went unanswered, and Camilla's scheduled charity appearance was abruptly cancelled for personal reasons, a silence that only amplified suspicion. Behind palace gates, unease turned to panic, because this was no ordinary scandal. It was a crisis of trust, of truth, and of whether the monarchy had tried to erase the most beloved woman to ever wear its crown, and worse, whether it was still doing so. Every unanswered question spawned another headline, every delay fed fresh theories, and at the center of it all stood Camilla, no longer merely queen consort but the alleged architect of a cover-up, prompting even palace allies to quietly distance themselves. Yet the most dangerous storm was not raging in public view. It was gathering behind gilded doors, where King Charles found himself trapped between blood and loyalty, husband and father, as Camilla sought protection and William demanded justice. When the reports finally reached him, Charles did not respond with anger, but with paralysis, heavy silence of recognition, of a man who had long feared this reckoning might come. He had spent years trying to outrun the past, to bury it, to convince himself it was finally at rest, but as Diana's name once again dominated headlines and the scent of scorched paper lingered, that fragile illusion collapsed. He did not go to Camilla, and he did not go to William. Instead, he made one call. He called and their meeting was brief but seismic, and wasted no time on pleasantries as she laid out the truth with calm precision, warning Charles that this would not go away and that if he failed to act, the public would act for him. He listened in silence, nodding, offering nothing in return as two forces warred behind his eyes, loyalty to his wife and guilt over the woman he had once loved and lost in plain sight. When he finally confronted Camilla, the composure collapsed. She wept not with guilt, but with exhaustion, insisting she was being hunted yet again, forced to compete with a ghost 3 decades after Diana's death. She begged not merely for understanding, but for survival, while Charles saw beneath the tears something more unsettling, not of Diana, but of the truth slipping beyond her control. Then came William, his words few and his tone glacial, making it clear that erasing his mother meant erasing him, standing not as heir but as a son over the ashes of Diana's legacy. He did not ask Charles to choose. He made it painfully clear the choice already existed between wife and son. That night, Charles did not sleep as memories of Diana's final days flooded back, their last conversations echoing with unspoken regrets and truths he had buried in order to move forward with Camilla, steps that now felt like betrayals replayed in full color. The nation watched as he stood at an impossible crossroads, knowing every path carried a devastating price. Protect Camilla and fuel suspicion, or side with William and fracture his second marriage, leaving a king stripped of certainty beneath the crown. Just as the dust threatened to settle, a long-hidden letter surfaced, one Diana herself feared might one day be needed, sealed and entrusted to a confidant outside palace walls to be opened only if the unthinkable occurred. That day had arrived. Kept for years in silence inside a private countryside drawer, the letter Iana's final safeguard as never meant for the public or even her sons, but for a future moment when her voice would no longer echo inside the palace and someone would try to erase the parts of her the crown never fully accepted. Alarmed by headlines of burned papers and secret removals, Diana's friend recognized the prophecy and broke the seal, revealing words that chilled the nation. Diana warned calmly but painfully that if the letter was being read, the effort to erase her had begun, detailing a slow, deliberate strategy to remove her presence from royal history and naming events and meetings that eerily mirrored the present crisis. She described in brutal honesty the psychological torment she endured, a slighting, isolation, and silences louder than scandal. Warned of a campaign not just to undermine her in life, but to reclaim and shrink her image after death, writing that they needed to make her small because they knew she would always be too big. Most devastating were her fears for William and Harry, that they would one day be handed a curated version of their mother shaped by survival rather than truth, pleading that their memories be protected because if those were stolen, the last part of her would die. The letter reached, and without ceremony, and she did not hesitate, he handed it to William. And with the truth finally in his hands, William made a move no one anticipated. Trained for silence, he chose defiance instead, stepping before the world and breaking royal tradition to declare war on the rewriting of his mother's legacy. What was meant to be a routine charity gala became a turning point, and as William took the stage, dressed in the quiet authority of a future king, it was clear that something fundamental had shifted. Nothing would ever be the same again. Gone was the polished reserve in William's posture. What emerged was a wounded but resolute son, unwilling to allow his mother's voice to be buried beneath royal dust. He did not begin with protocol, but with Diana, standing before a crowd of dignitaries, philanthropists, and cameras broadcasting live to the world as he spoke of love, pain, and truth. He told them there were voices that should never be silenced, and his mother's was one of them, a line that caused the room to fall utterly still. Without naming names, he addressed the chaos directly, warning that when the past is edited, its lessons are lost, his voice cracking only briefly before steadying as he spoke of letters, memories, and the truth Diana had left behind that would not be erased on his watch. The message was unmistakable. No one has the right to erase another's legacy for their own comfort. The audience erupted, not with polite applause but raw, emotional affirmation, as reporters rewrote headlines in real time and the heir to the throne shattered royal silence with a single speech. Yet it was not just his words that confirmed everything. T was who stood beside him. And silent, stoic, and unyielding, her presence validating the rumors, the whispers, and the war behind palace walls. Within hours, headlines exploded again, this time with fury, as Camilla's carefully managed image came under relentless scrutiny, questions of moral authority and legacy tampering flooding the press. William left without interviews, but his words echoed across every home and every heart that had once broken for Diana, triggering consequences that could not be contained. Power built on silence began to collapse, and Camilla's image, sculpted over decades, started to crumble as she vanished from public life entirely. Inside the palace, the mood shifted from defense to survival, advisors warning Charles that her presence had become a liability, contingency plans quietly forming as appearances were reassigned and her role reduced without announcement, an internal exile in all but name. The public had made its loyalty clear. Iana's legacy had not been erased, it had been resurrected, and in that resurrection, the future of the monarchy was being reshaped. Through it all, and remained firm, speaking to no one yet leaving no doubt she had been the force behind a reckoning, proving that once truth is uncovered, it does not return to hiding. And so, from the ashes of a burned letter, a legacy rose stronger than ever, Diana's voice no longer silenced, but echoing louder than the crown itself.